Welcome to the Neo-Masculine Minutes podcast show, where my co-host Dan Ploger and myself, John Protek, discuss the truth about unreliable information. In this current age of rapid-fire information, people are growing weary of biased personal opinions, outrageous ideological narratives, outright lies, and intentional propaganda meant to divide us. Dan and I wonder, when will people fall for the truth? When will they reject the informational threats that are destroying families, ruining societies, and destroying cultures all around the world? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Neo-Masculine Minutes, where men, who are the sentinels of truth, and Dan and I, who are harbingers of truth, actually they're sentinels of information, and we're the harbingers of truth. We discuss issues that are affecting not only American soil, but also that are affecting everybody across the globe. And if you haven't heard, so thank you, welcome back. If you haven't heard already, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, the dictator down there, not too far south of America, just won another election. Isn't that funny? He always wins these elections with 51% of the vote. And my intuition tells me something's not right, because the opposing party, as the precincts were coming in, the information that they were getting was that he was ahead, that Maduro was slightly behind. Then all of a sudden, at a certain time period, the information's out there. Don't take our word for it. But all of a sudden, very similar to what happened in the American election in 2020, all these votes came in, and then Maduro, it was almost a vertical leap in votes coming in, like a huge dump of votes, with over 90% for the current dictator, and then he wins the election. So the question today is, Dan, who decides these elections? Is it the people? Is it the military? Is it the established political elite? Or is it America? What's going on in Venezuela? What do you think? What's your intuition telling you?
I think that the odds in Las Vegas ought to go with Maduro on the next one too. Seems a pretty sure bet. No, in Venezuela, I understand that they have some sort of receipt method by where you vote, you receive a receipt of some sort, and these were used to track what the actual vote counts were by the opposition team, of course, and the Maduro was clearly losing by very, very substantial margins. And there was no chance that Maduro could have been successful in that election based upon the sample size of what was collected. So what do you do when your dictator refuses to hand over power? This is what the Democrats have said they're afraid Donald Trump would do. But I'll tell you, the way that the Democrats project, I'm really concerned that Kamala and Joe Biden won't leave the White House after the next election. So what if Donald Trump wins? If it's determined that he's a threat to democracy, maybe the Kamala Harris would be justified in declaring the White House as a win.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I can remember when I was working in my shop down in Florida years ago, when Maduro had first taken power. And I noticed in my business, we sold a lot of stuff to international travelers, but I noticed, our team noticed, a lot of Venezuelans. I mean, like more than usual. We'd always get shoppers from around the world. And I had a discussion with a guy who owned a business down there in property, and they had lost everything to Maduro. And what happened was, when Maduro took power, the first thing that he did was he attacked. They have a court very similar to our Supreme Court. He attacked their court system and started to stack it. What do they call that? Packet with people that had socialist or communist viewpoints. And they basically destroyed the rule of law in Venezuela. And then there was a time period where people, middle class, who had worked, also came from long lines of successful entrepreneurs and business owners, They were losing their property. They were losing their businesses. The government was coming in and just taking over. And there was this mass exodus of Venezuelans. We saw the same thing with Brazilians too, but out of Venezuela. And so then you get this guy who comes into power, and he just, in fact, there's been times in Maduro's political career when they had social unrest that he would make a decree which gave him complete authority over all the sectors of government, to include the military. And anytime there was dissension, he would quash it rather quickly. So think about that, Dan. The scenario you lay out is real. Donald Trump's declared an enemy of the state by whoever, and Donald Trump's followers become enemies of the state. It sets up the playing field for not being fair and for taking power and just doing it whatever the hell they want. Adds two carrier groups steam towards the Middle East. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but imagine if some type of global event like a world war breaks out, and the current American administration, by powers that fall because we're at war, they come under the War Act. Imagine if this current administration said, well, we can't have an election this year, or some other scenario, which is possible. Imagine is this America's last stand this year? Is this it?
Well, there's only one thing standing in the way of preventing that from happening, and that's the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court. But of course, now the Schumers and the Democrats' assault on the Supreme Court is understandable, predictable, and consistent with their global intent.
Yeah, and anybody that can do the deep dive, we talk about, get out of the group think tank, dry yourself off and get on the road to the scientific method, critical thought. Anybody that actually studies history and how governments have fallen and been converted to something different, the rule of law is always like the first things to go. And you can't deny the fact that you rape somebody and you're out on bond the next day with these progressive and liberal and socialist minded judges. You can't tell me, and I'm not being a smart aleck, that the rule of law in America is under assault and in a big way. And like Dan just pointed out, that now they're going after the Supreme Court. It's been going on in the smaller jurisdictions for a while now, but I can't imagine being an illegal infiltrator in America, raping a woman, maybe it's just a simple burglary, or or shoplifting charge, and you're out the next day. Because if I was in Russia as an American citizen and I raped one of their citizens, or I shoplifted in one of their stores, or I beat up a cop over there, I would bet you they have a rule of law. The American government would be negotiating, or maybe not, because I'm a real criminal. And that leads us to another discussion, these prisoner swaps. But I don't want to lose sight of what's going on in Venezuela. So usurp the rule of law, usurp the election system, and you open up a playing field for people in power doing whatever the hell they want, forgetting all about the people who they're supposedly supposed to represent.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And if you get if you have the Senate and the House and the presidency and the Supreme Court, there's nothing to stand in your way. That's fact.
Yeah, so all I would say is the election process this year, 2024 in Venezuela, is uncanny, which begs you, if you're at all interested in the truth and justice and the rule of law, to do the research on your own. Don't just take the narrative. You can tune on the TV in America and look at these networks. You know which ones they are, where the the message is all the same. Maduro won, Maduro won, Maduro won. Yeah, we're questioning it. We're acting like we are. But do we really care that there's socialism and or communism to south of our border when maybe, just maybe, behind the scenes, we're hoping that the same thing happens here. And then we give all of the power to the global elite. And the individual might as well just kiss his rear end or her rear end goodbye, because they don't have a chance of ever living a life of freedom and or with human rights, which, by the way, are universal. They're God-given. They're spiritual, what human beings deserve to live a full life. Any closing thoughts on Maduro, Dan?
Well, just recognize the pattern, the patterns that you see, and try and extend that, extrapolate to your situation or our situation in this country. Maduro's first reaction when the vote was challenged, he said, well, we will have the Supreme Court evaluate the election, the veracity of the election. Well, he's already taken care of the Supreme Court. So recognize these patterns, see the patterns, because these things are very meaningful.
Well put, Dan. Great advice. Be masculine, men. Embrace it. Women, help us as much as you can. Let's resist lies and unreliable information. Let's stand up for the individual. And by the way, a book tip, in case you're interested. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It's been around for a while. I know it's very thick. It's like 900 pages, but it would behoove you to take the time, pick up a copy of it, maybe, do the electronic Kindle version, but read Atlas Shrugged, and figure things out for yourself. Thanks, Dan. See you next time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Neo-Masculine Minutes podcast show. For the men, it's simple. Think for yourself. Dig deep. Reach down. We appreciate your earnestness in wanting to embrace your masculinity again. You are indeed the sentinels of information. The people you care about are waiting for your leadership, hoping you step up to fulfill your masculine role as protectors of the human race, to save it from any further destruction caused by unreliable information.